Chairman Hughes, would you indulge me the kindness of a very short comment before I start my prepared statement? Very, very brief.
I'll just ask you out of respect to all the witnesses to do it very shortly. Thank you.
I just want to point out that Senator Hall, Senator Perry, and several of the folks that have said trust the science and asserted that a biological binary is science are not here to hear my testimony, and I encourage you to tell them to listen, because I am a scientist, and I will be explaining why that is not the case.
Well, thank you for that. And so you'll know, and everyone else, senators are in and out, their staffs are watching this, all being recorded, but I will pass that along. They already know, but I'll tell them. And thank you for that. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman Hughes and honorable members of the Texas Senate. My name is Cody Miller Pyke, representing both myself as an individual and Doctors for Change, a Houston-based nonprofit dedicated to promoting the health of all Texans. And I'm here to testify in strong opposition to SB 29. Members, I have a bachelor's degree in music and education, a master's in biomedical ethics, a Juris Doctorate, a master's of healthcare law, and in one more year, I will finish my medical doctorate at Baylor College of Medicine. I am an educator, an advocate, and next year, a physician. But most relevantly to today's hearing, I am a transgender and non-binary Texan, and I urge this committee to not pass SB 29 for 3 reasons. First, SB 29's presumptive definition of biological sex based on a child's birth certificate is not supported by any medical science. I've delivered babies with supervision. When a child is born, a physician looks at the genitals of that baby at that time and makes a judgment call. This bill therefore erases the existence of intersex children and children with congenital insensitivity to sex hormones. For example, as with the case of the Olympic athlete Caster Semenya, she was born with XY chromosomes but a congenital insensitivity and deficiency to 5-alpha reductase, leading her to have a vagina but also high levels of testosterone. So this bill would say she's a woman, but then she has high levels of testosterone, and the Olympics ultimately banned her because of that high level of testosterone. Science has also conclusively shown that how humans perceive their own gender identity is neither strictly nor intrinsically tied to whatever is in between our legs. Second, transgender student athletes do not adversely affect interscholastic sports. 9 years of CDC data show that trans-inclusive policies have no negative effect on girls' sports. We want to talk about advantage at any time in transition? Okay. The Journal of Sports Medicine did a systematic review of the evidence and found at no point in a child or adult's transition do they have a benefit in athletics. And finally, my last point, SB 29, and this has been talked by some of my colleagues, it threatens the lives of transgender children who could be your kids and your grandkids. 1 in 6 of Generation Z are LGBTQ. There's zero evidence that children who are trans put other children at risk. And in fact, the research shows that they are the ones harmed in gendered spaces. When I was a teenager in a San Antonio public school, before I came out as trans, I was just a boy. I was beaten and bullied for being queer. I was raped by a male classmate. This bill would not have protected me then, and it does not protect a single child now. So in conclusion, all this bill does is send a message to transgender, intersex, non-binary, and gender non-conforming children. We don't want you, you don't belong here. And they are already at a higher risk of committing suicide. Do not alienate them further. So please, honorable senators, as the body that claims to be the most deliberative in the nation and claims to care about Texan youth and preventing youth suicide, I'll steal a line from another friend. Kill this bill, fund our schools. And please, ask me all the questions. I could talk about the science for days. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Senators, any questions for the witness? Senator Zaffarani has a question. You're recognized.
Sir, what is the peer-reviewed medical evidence regarding transgender persons in sports?
So, as I mentioned, the Journal of Sports Medicine looked at all age groups and found that there is no competitive advantage. I am not aware of a competitive advantage study specifically in pediatrics. I can find out if there is one, but I'm not aware of one. But in all ages, there is no competitive advantage. Also, going back to that example of Caster Semenya, when the Olympics they told her, even though she was born a woman, that if she did not take drugs to lower her testosterone level, she could never run again. And so she stopped running because of that invasion into her body. And the evidence of advantages in sports, Number one, not all sports require the same thing. If you're 6'8", you're going to be great at basketball, but terrible at gymnastics. And testosterone itself has only been connected to a 10 to 12% increase in ability in very specific things like sprinting. And that's it. And that is only in very isolated situations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Powell.
So, Doctor, could you speak just a little bit more to that genetics piece that you mentioned earlier?
I would love to, because I'm also completing the genetics and genomics track at Baylor College of Medicine. So we heard earlier there's XX and XY, and that's just false. There is XX, there's XY, there's X naught, also known as Turner syndrome, there's XXY, also known as Klinefelter syndrome, there's XX males who have a translocation of the single SRY gene from the Y chromosome onto the X chromosome during the creation of the gametes. There is no such thing as Y nothing because a Y chromosome by itself is too fragile to survive. And I'm sure there are others I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but you know, the person who testified before me talked about God made us. I don't know anything about God. I don't claim to know anything about the divine. But if God made us genetically diverse, and God made trans people too.
So we've heard some earlier testimony that just wants to boil it down to two different options. And what I hear you say this evening is that there are far more than just two ways to look at a person's gender.
Yes, ma'am. And even outside of the sex chromosomes, there can be congenital deficiencies or lacks of particular enzymes, like I mentioned with Castor Semenya. That is not an X-linked issue. That is a genetic condition that is not linked with the sex chromosomes that caused her deficiency of the 5-alpha reductase enzyme, which is necessary to convert testosterone into dihydrotestosterone. And without dihydrotestosterone in utero, the default is a vagina and ovaries, and dihydrotestosterone is what changes that into a penis and testicles. So even though Semenya was XY, because she lacked one enzyme genetically, she was born with a vagina and ovaries. So what would this bill say? This bill would say that she's a woman. But then the Olympics said she's too masculine. Also, Senator Zaffirini, I wanted to call back to a question you asked earlier about different communities being disproportionately questioned about whether or not they're actually girls. And yes, there is evidence in the peer-reviewed literature that women of color are routinely accused of being transgender or too masculine, and this bill threatens to disproportionately invade their privacy.